Hello and welcome. My name is Carly and I'm very excited because I'm going to be teaching you all about mindfulness, what mindfulness is and how it can help you. So welcome. I'm going to start our sessions with a really simple question. And my question to you is, where is your brain? Told you it was easy. So where is your brain? Point to where your brain is. Yeah, I'm sure all of you have pointed to your heads. That's where your brains are. They're in your head, protected by your skull. It's an organ like your heart, your liver, your lungs, and it's crucial to being alive. So it's here, it cannot move. So an easy question, I told you it was. So now a more tricky question really. I'd like you to think about and point to where you think your mind is. Where do you think your mind is? Bit trickier that one, so I'll give you a moment. So point to where you think your mind is. So when I teach in schools, most children point back to their heads, where they said their brain was. So we're going to just do a little experiment now to see if that's true. So when I say go, you're going to clap your hands really hard 3 times and then stop. Ready? Go. Stop. So I wonder where you think your mind is now. I'd say it's in your hands because your hands maybe are a bit tingly. We've also moved our hands, so we're aware of them. We've clapped, so we're thinking about clapping and moving our hands. So our awareness and our mind has gone to our hands. So that tells us that our mind can travel. It's not stuck in our heads like our brains, it can travel. So if I were to be looking out the window now, thinking about what's happening out there, then my mind's not here with you, it's gone out there to the window and what's happening outside. So our minds can travel. Also, they can time travel. So if I'm thinking of the past and what happened yesterday, maybe even what happened a year ago, then my mind's gone to the past, so it's traveled back to the past. If I start thinking about what might happen tomorrow, what might happen later in the day, or even next year, then my mind has traveled to the future. So our minds can also time travel. So they can move around where our attention goes, but they can also time travel to the past and the future. So what we're going to be doing with our mindfulness is we're going to be training our minds. Now, lots of people go to the gym and do workouts to train their muscles and their bodies. We're going to be doing workouts and training our minds. And if our minds work really well, it actually improves the way our brains work, which is fantastic. So a lot of mindfulness is about training our minds. Okay, so we're going to start our session. Our main learning today is about a part of our brain, and that's our prefrontal cortex. It's a tricky word, isn't it? Don't worry, we're going to say it a lot, and so let's see if you can say it after me, and that will help you to learn it. So I'm going to say it, you can repeat: prefrontal cortex. But don't worry, I'll be saying it a lot. We can think of it as a bit like the leader of the brain. That's a bit easier. And it's the leader, the boss of the brain. And it's here at the front of our brain. So maybe put your hand here to remind you. The prefrontal cortex is the front of our brains. It's a really important part of our brain. And it's like the boss, I said, it's the leader. So if it's working well, it tends to mean that the rest of our brain's working well too. Now, a lot of grown-ups don't know much about their brains, so maybe after you've watched this, you could go to your grown-up and say, do you know what the prefrontal cortex is or where it is? And you can tell them some facts about it. So that would be brilliant. So the prefrontal cortex helps us to do 3 things. So firstly, it helps us to concentrate really well. If it's working well, then we concentrate well. Secondly, it helps us to make good choices. And thirdly, helps us to be our best. So if our prefrontal cortex is working well, we can concentrate really well, we can make good choices, and then we can be our best. So it helps with those 3 things, really important part of our brain. So now I'm going to share a video with you, and this is somebody who's definitely using their prefrontal cortex. And it's this person is a famous diver. You may have heard of him. His name is Tom Daley, and he has dived for England, for Great Britain in the Olympics, and he's won lots of medals. So he is fantastic at what he does. So he definitely has learned to use his prefrontal cortex really well to be his best. And I know from reading interviews with him that he does actually practice mindfulness. So I'm going to show you a video of him about to dive, and I want you to really think about What's he doing that shows us that he's concentrating? How can we see that he is focused and in the moment and using that part of his brain, the prefrontal cortex? So I'm going to share this video with you now. So this is taken at the Olympics. So I'll just make it nice and big. So you can see there's already lots of people there, and these are the crowd. They're cheering him on, but not only that, he's on telly, so he's got millions of people around the world watching him. So that's going to make him quite nervous, isn't it? So let's see how he deals with his nerves and how he does his best. So they're all cheering for him, and he'll be able to hear this. So he looked a bit nervous there, but he's taken a deep breath. He's steadying himself. He's not rushing to the end of the diving platform he's not rushing, is he? He's taking his time. He's preparing. He's going to take a look. There we go. Saw his shoulders go. He took another deep breath to steady himself. And there we go. He did an amazing dive. Let's watch that again. He comes up, he looks a little bit around, but mainly now he's bringing himself into the moment, isn't he? He's not looking around at what's going on. His mind is focused on what he's doing. And then he takes another deep breath and off he goes. So he did a really good dive there. So that's all about using his prefrontal cortex. So he wasn't looking around at the audience, was he? He wasn't sort of focused on what was going on around him, because his mind, he wasn't looking in the audience to see if his friends were there or his family. And I'm sure he wasn't thinking about what he's having for dinner either. And he probably wasn't thinking about what he had for breakfast. His mind was in that moment. He was focused. He was calm. He was concentrated. So he was definitely using his prefrontal cortex. So he has done mindfulness for quite a few years now to train himself to do his best. So he was concentrating. He was making good choices about his dive. And therefore he was being his best. He was doing his best dive. So he was really, really focused. And actually, if he hadn't been, and he just rushed to the end of the platform, he looked all around and wasn't focused and his mind was everywhere, he wouldn't have done a good dive either. And actually, he could have hurt himself. So he is extremely focused, and he's learned how to improve his prefrontal cortex. So we are now going to try our first bit of brain training, our mind training. So a lot of the time when we do our mindfulness, we're going to use our breath to help us, because focusing on our breath is quite tricky, but the more we do it, we're training our mind to be where we want it to be. And our breath is brilliant. We've always got it with us. It won't disappear. We've got it there. And you can't breathe in the future and you can't breathe in the past. So you can only breathe in the present moment. So our breath helps us to be really mindful, and it helps us to improve our mind and our concentration. So we're going to do a little breathing practice. And now whenever I ask us to do a breathing practice, I'm going to really encourage you to do what's called a belly breath. And I'm going to use this to help me explain that to you. So when you're doing a belly breath, I want you to imagine your breath is going down into your belly, making it really big, like this ball, like a balloon. And you hold it for a moment. And when you breathe out, your belly goes small again. So we're letting all the air out, a bit like letting an air out of a balloon, the air out of a balloon. So let's try that. Breathing in, belly gets lovely and big. Breathing out, it gets smaller again. So when you're doing your breathing practices, try to use that nice deep belly breath. It's really good for calming you down. So what we're going to do now is a breathing practice, and it's called counting your breaths in a minute. So it's kind of telling you exactly what we're going to do. We're going to count our breaths for a minute. Sounds really easy, but it's tricky, because when you start trying to concentrate just on your breath, your mind will start wandering all over the place. It'll probably start thinking about what TV program you're going to watch later, what game you're going to play, what you might be having for dinner, those kind of thoughts. But if that happens, that's fine, that's normal. What you need to do is train your mind to come back to your breath. So if you lose count, doesn't matter, start again. And if you only ever did 3 mindful breaths, that's fine. That's really good. You've been trained. That's part of training our brain. So what you're going to do, make sure you're in a nice comfy position, maybe sitting with your legs crossed on the floor, or on a chair with your both feet on the floor, sitting up nice and straight. And you're going to hear my bell ring, because we're going to do this with our eyes closed. It really helps us to focus inwards. If I've got my eyes open, I could be looking all around. Okay, so you're going to close your eyes in a moment, and then I'll talk you through, but when you hear my bell, that's when you're going to start breathing. Okay, and I'll keep an eye on the time, and when a minute's gone past, I'm going to do it again, and you're going to stop counting. So like I said, if your mind wanders off, just start again, it doesn't matter. If you get distracted by a noise, doesn't matter, start again. Like I said, this is all about starting to train our minds to be where we want them to be. And where we want them to be is in our body, thinking about our breath and counting our breath. Okay, so just start to settle down now, sitting up nice and straight and closing your eyes. So now you've got your eyes closed, just sort of feel what it's like sitting down, taking your attention to your breath. Feel it going in and filling up your belly with air, and then going out, your belly gets small again. So just focusing on your breath now, bringing your attention, your mind to your breath. And when you hear my bell, you're going to start counting, okay? So eyes are closed, listening for the bell, and the second time you hear it, you need to stop counting, okay? So if your mind goes wandering, bring it back and start again. Doesn't matter how many times you do that, just keep doing it. Off we go. Starting to count. Start again if you get distracted. Mind wanders, bring it back to counting. Only stop when you hear the second bell. Just keep starting again if you get distracted. How did you do? Tricky, isn't it? It sounds easy, but that's your first go at doing a little bit of brain training, training our minds and our minds and our attention to be where we want them to be. So that's the end of the first session, and we've learned quite a lot. So I'm going to recap and go over what we've learned today. So we've learned that our minds can move around. It's not stuck in our heads like our brains. It can move wherever our attention goes. We've learned that mindfulness can improve the way our brain works. If we practice mindfulness, it actually changes the way our brains work and improves the way they work. We learned about the prefrontal cortex. We learned that it's at the front of our brain, it's like the leader, and it helps us to do three things. I wonder if you can remember them. Concentration, good choices, and then being our best. So those are the three things our prefrontal cortex helps us with. We also learned that focusing on our breathing helps to train our minds. And we did a little breath practice, didn't we? So we started our first bit of brain training. We also learned about the belly breath, didn't we? So we learned about taking breath into our belly and then out, breath into our bellies, making them big and breathing out and smaller. Those kind of breaths really help to calm us. So we've learned quite a lot, haven't we? So I hope you've enjoyed your first go at doing mindfulness and learning some things about mindfulness. If you'd like to learn more, then we can meet again in the next video. And I've also got a handout that you hopefully have got with this video where you can practice what we've learned, go over what we've learned and do some practice before the next session. So lovely to be here, and I look forward to seeing you at the next video. Goodbye.